All right, I have 6 o'clock here. If Mr. Weedman would like to pop in. Very good. All right, it is 6 p.m. I'll call this public hearing to order. This is on zoning case 2020-0Z, 07Z, and I hear an echo. Someone has audio going, I think, running the live stream with their microphone open. All right. It's not me, I hope. Not this time. All right. We'll get going with the hearing here. First of all, we've called it to order. If there's anyone who is planning to testify in this hearing, I'd like to swear you in, first of all. If you could appear on camera briefly and raise your right hand if you're able. And even if you don't appear on camera, please raise your right hand if you'll be testifying. All right, for each of you, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or pursuant to affirmation?
I do.
All right, we'll consider you all sworn. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and begin with a staff report. First of all, Skylar Miller is here for that. Mr. Miller, what do you have for us?
Let me do a screen share real fast.
And you are difficult to hear.
Can you hear me better now?
That's better. Okay.
All right. So the case that I have before you tonight is case number 2020-07Z. Applicant is Grand Communities LLC. The request tonight is a zone change to D multifamily residential. The location of the property is 8760 Montgomery Road. The total acreage of the site is 2.4731 acres, with approximately 185 feet of right of way. Topography is a hillside with it's sloping. It's at the high point on the north side of the property, and it's generally sloping south to southeast. Okay. Again, applicant is proposing a zone change from B single family residential to B multifamily for the purposes of constructing a multifamily development, but of townhouses. Ideally, I think it's even been in the application as attached single family. So this isn't rental properties. Okay, let's see here. All right, so surrounding zoning for this site, to the north is on the same side of the street is 00 Planned Office District. To the south is E Retail District. There's a strip center and parking garage that are situated on this lot. To the west, we have Planned Retail District. This is the Mercedes-Benz dealership. And then to the east, we have a single family residential district. So we do have a subdivision here, and then larger acreage lots back here to the east and to the south. All right, so I'm going to give you a little history on the land use of this site. We're looking right here with this golden green. This is actually the 2002 Sycamore Township land use plan. And this site was originally proposed along with the corridor to the north as transitional residence, and then the slope, the steeper piece of this lot was slotted for open space. In 2008, there was a land use update. So we're looking at the same site here in blue. And you can see this is the two retail districts that I was talking about earlier. This is that corridor. The land use plan changed to transitional use with office. Unfortunately, what was left out of the that 2008 process were new definitions. The 2008 was an update to the 2002. There wasn't a new document that superseded. It was just amendments to the 2002 plan. So what we have are, I'm going to give you a couple pertinent, possibly pertinent definitions from 2002 to try and determine what transitional use with office means. And that's kind of the question tonight in front of the board. Since we don't have a clear-cut definition of this, I'm asking the trustees tonight to make a decision based on their interpretation of the land use plan. So we have transitional residence, that's low-density detached or attached housing and related compatible uses. That does exclude office, retail, industrial, and provides that transition between single-family homes and other types of development. So then we also have mixed-use transitional, which is detached or attached housing, low-intensity office, such as conversion of a single-family residence and related compatible uses that provide a transition between residential uses and other types of development. And then we have office. So office, because this new category says with office, I put this in here. Office uses and related compatible uses at intensities consistent with surrounding development. Okay. So I'm going to come back to our site plan here. There is there's kind of a long history of proposals on this site. The parcel has historically been zoned single family residence B, and there is actually a single family home on that site. In 2005, there was a request for a zone change and PUD approval from B residence to O planned units for the construction of a 26,600 square foot two-story office, including a underground parking garage and surface parking. The applicant at that time requested a continuation, and then that case was never heard. So that kind of fell off our radar and was not determined, or there was no true outcome of that. Let's see. As far as the D multifamily residential district, there is density criteria. The applicant will discuss their PUD plan that went through zoning commission back in December. That case was tabled until such a time as there was an outcome on the decision of the zone change that we're hearing tonight. So with that, once the zone change is in effect, there's different tiers of development categories based on density. So the first density category is low density, and that has a max of 7.26 dwelling units per acre. If the applicant were to propose a development on this site that met that density, it would be permitted as of right, and it would just be an administrative review by my office. If they proposed a density with a maximum of 9.7 dwelling units per acre, that would require a PUD1. And again, they do have a case pending in on the zoning commission's agenda. And then finally, this district does also allow for high density with a maximum density of 14.5. That does, however, require a PUD2. Okay. So on December 14th of last year, the zoning commission did consider the applicant's proposal for the zone change, and they did not feel that the transitional use with office category was consistent with the proposal. And they are recommending, it was a unanimous decision, I believe, and they are recommending denial to the Board of Trustees. Okay. And I'm available if you have any questions for me. Go ahead and.
Skylar, what was that vote on the by planning and zoning? Was it unanimous?
It was unanimous to deny.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller, you said if the rezoning were granted to a D, there would be 7 point, I forget how many residences allowed per acre. What does that translate to as of right if there were D zoning on this site approximately?
So we would do the density calculation based on the net acreage. So we would remove the right of way. So that takes down to a little over 2.2 acres. So we would be looking at a maximum of approximately 16 units on this single property.
Okay. All right. The land use plan that you described and showed images of, that is our current existing plan, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Miller before we move on to the applicant making any further presentation they may have? If not, does the applicant wish to make a presentation at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Jason Wisniewski with Grand Communities. I have some slides I would like to present on my screen if that's acceptable, and maybe just take about 10 minutes to walk through a few things.
Okay. Skylar, can you enable that for him, please? It is. Okay, thank you.
So first of all, thank you everybody for your time tonight. I have some slides here that I just wanted to walk through. And Mr. James, you'll recognize most of this from, and some of the residents that are on the line will recognize this from a meeting we had a few weeks ago in which we kind of went through some revised proposal, at least from what was previously submitted. So bear with me if this sounds familiar, because a lot of it will be, although there's some additional information. But previously, we were proposing 22 units on this site. It's a mix of front entry townhomes and rear entry townhomes. So front entry townhomes are on the north property line, rear entry townhomes on the southern or towards the southern part of the site. And we have revised that, or at least what, again, I know the development plan isn't what's at issue here tonight, but I'm trying to outline why we want the rezoning. But our current path forward and what we think is kind of a reasonable solution is coming down to 16 units, 8 front entry units on the north, 8 rear entry units on the south. Gives us a density of 6.4 units per acre. And Skylar, I'll leave it to you to discuss, what that does to the rezoning. But this is our current plan or desire, and it resulted from a few things. One is after we went to the planning or the zoning commission and got a unanimous recommendation to deny. We heard some things. We met with residents. We tried to address 4 key things. Building height, building massing, increased separation from adjacent properties, and preservation of additional wooded areas. And those things kind of move and shift together. And I'm going to walk through a couple slides here that show how those things kind of move and shift. But overall, and density was the key one, obviously. And we've reduced that by 6 units, or I believe like 30% of an additional 6 out of 22, so 30% reduction in overall density. Increased building separation. So this red, there's a yellow line here that used to be the building where the building was originally proposed to come towards the property line. So we were about 100.
Jason, excuse me, if you are trying to share slides right now, we're not seeing them.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, sorry.
There we go. Okay.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so here's our current plan. I'm sorry. So again, 16 units, 8 front entry units on the north end of the property, 8 rear entry units on the southern end of the property. Again, for orientation, Montgomery Road over here to the left-hand corner of the page. 16 total units, a density of 6.4 units per acre. We've increased the building separation. This yellow line right here is where the buildings were previously proposed. Again, when we had 22 units on this plan, you can see how close they came to the property line here. Most importantly, we were about 115 feet off the nearest point of the existing home closest to the property. We've now pushed that back to 157 feet. And again, you can increase the amount of wooded area that is preserved along that property line. Drawn a cross section here. So this is the existing home that I pointed out. These are our proposed units here. So this cross section we're looking at is through that home to our units. And again, you can see the amount of separation. These buildings are higher, and this, building height was an issue that was brought up. I'll show you some elevations. We're showing here kind of a more classic style of architecture that has, gables and roof lines that are higher. We are able to lower that. These buildings right now are about between 40 and 45 feet to from grade to the top of this gable here, but we do have options to lower that building height and again address some of the residents' concern, but it was just drawn that way. Another cross section that we were asked to do through the residents is the medical office here on the right-hand side of the page versus the townhomes over here on the left, and how much taller we would be. And once again, with our peaked roofs, we would be about 5 feet taller than the existing medical office building that's just north of the proposed development. But if we were to do something that would be more of like a industrial or modern industrial style of building, these roofs become flat and they would be much closer, if not lower than a finished height of the medical office. So not only did the buildings get pushed to the west, the roadways, these yellow areas indicate the roads that came and how close they came to the property line. So there's a considerable amount of pullback. We actually had a turnaround in here that was oriented. It actually came to the north, which encroached a little bit more towards the property line. We've reoriented that to turn around towards the south, again, to increase this area for landscaping and tree preservation to screen these existing residents to the east. Increased tree preservation. So the existing tree canopy is this blue line here. That's where the trees are today. Our previous proposal had this red line. So we were basically clearing all the way back to the property line, that eastern property line, and considerably in the southern corner here. And what you see in this darker green area is what would be preserved. So by moving the buildings as far west as we can, by reducing that density, we've increased significantly the amount of wooded area that would be preserved and act as a screen from the existing homes. One last cross section. This would be the cross section through Concord Drive, through the Shoney residence back towards our house. Again, you can see down here, our buildings will be higher. There's no doubt. They're finished elevation relative to the existing residence. However, there will be a significant buffer in here, about a football field, if not a little bit longer than a football field. And that existing vegetation that occurs in here, you can see it through the sight line right here. That's what we're looking at. You see this existing vegetation that is and will be preserved by this revised development plan. The rear entry townhomes, again, these are what we're proposing in terms of building massing was an issue. I think before we had like 6-unit buildings, 5 or 6-unit buildings. We've done everything in 2 4-unit configurations. So 2 4-unit buildings of the rear entry, 2 4-unit buildings of the front entry. So to bring down that mass, to minimize the mass of the building, and again, this has that more traditional architecture to it, which you would see. Again, this was the rendering that we've shown a few times now, but that was kind of the style of architecture. we can reduce that by doing something that's more, has a more modern feel. Again, still high quality materials, brick, and architectural features such as bay windows but it's a different style, but it does, you can see right here, reduces that building height. Once again, the same thing with the front entry townhomes. These are the rear or the front entry with the garage in the front. Once again, that kind of traditional style of architecture versus something that's a little bit more modern, different kind of doors. But again, lowering that overall building height is something that we can and would consider, assuming that the rezoning is approved when we get to the development plan stage. Just a couple samples of the interiors. Again, these are modern interiors with spacious living areas, really geared towards young professionals, empty nesters. I'm not saying that there will not be children that live at Hill Point, but that's not the target market. That's not the demographic that we're after, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But again, just spacious interiors, high quality finishes. That's what that buyer expects. They do have owner's suites with ensuite bathrooms to appeal to that kind of higher end buyer that these price points are designed to hit. So again, just real quick, and then I'm finished, and I'll turn it back over to questions or comments. But our target market here again is young professionals and empty nesters. These are typically people who don't need a lot of amenities on site. The amenities are the area around it, Kenwood Town Center, the shopping, the restaurants, that kind of thing that they're looking for. Low maintenance lifestyle in terms of not having a lot of yard to mow or things to take care of. They want to get out and do things that are not in the home but away from the home. And these are still discerning buyers, right? These are people that have disposable income, that want some of the finer things in life, especially the empty nesters. They're at that point in life where they want those finer things and those finer finishes, and that's what these homes provide. So with that, I'll be quiet and answer any questions or take any comments that anybody might want to have or offer. And again, thank you everybody for your time.
Jason?
Yes.
Yeah. How many square feet are these units?
They range. The rear entry are a minimum of just under 1,900 square feet. The front entry are just over 2,000 square feet.
And what's the price point?
Every one of them has a two-car garage, integral two-car garage as well, whether that's from the front or from the back.
What's the price point of these?
We're expecting them to start in the mid fives, and then again they'll go up from there depending on the finishes that people, the options that people choose.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have an opportunity for other comments in a moment. Does anyone have any questions though for Mr. Wisniewski, following Mr. Weidman's questions there?
I've got one clarification. I know that height was brought up during the formal meeting with the residents. Just so everyone knows, in the B district, the principal buildings are allowed to be a maximum height of 3.5 stories or 45 feet, whichever is less. So the original proposed design would be permissible without a variance or any special exception.
Gary, could you say that again, please?
Yeah, I'll do a quick screen share.
It's difficult to hear you again. You might need to be closer to the microphone.
Yeah, Skylar, is it, you said 45 feet. Are they going to come down lower than 40 feet for this?
Well, these, if Jason goes back to his,
we're expecting them to start in the mid. Mr. James and Skylar, I'm having a hard time hearing, but if I'm correct, I believe that the existing B2 district allows an average or a maximum height of 35 feet, I believe, and somebody wave the red flag if that's incorrect, or
Skylar
2.5 stories, whichever is
here.
less. Oh, okay.
Okay, Skylar, could you try again? What is the height?
Okay, so within the B district, I know this came up during the informal meeting with the residents, but to clarify, the B district allows for a maximum of 3.5 stories or 45 feet, whichever is less. So the original elevations that were proposed would be permissible with the district.
Okay.
So 3.5 stories or 45 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
So, okay, and I just wanted to make one clarification. So what Skylar, it is the current zoning district though is B2, correct?
Yeah, B.
I'm sorry. Yes, B. I'm sorry. So it's B. So it's 2.5 stories or 35 feet. So the one thing that I wanted to point out is that the
Jason, you're breaking up now and your video is frozen, I believe. Technology's great.
I love this. I love it. Can everybody see this building now?
Yes.
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 Okay. So this building right here is from when you get into from like here from the garage to the peak of this roof is about 45 feet. However, in this elevation from the garage to the top of this is 35 feet. So we could do this style of elevation under the I guess what I want to say is we're not necessarily asking to build a high or a taller building than we would currently be allowed on that site. It would just be a trade-off of, is this a more desirable architecture or is that a more desirable architecture? So we have, I guess what I'm saying is we have elevations in our repertoire that would make the, would meet the existing.
We lost you again there. Would meet the existing, and we lost you.
Okay.
Well, he answered my question, so he could go
I just wanted to
to,
make one clarification. So what Skylar, it is the current zoning district though is B2, correct? So it's 2.5 stories or 35 feet. So the one thing that I wanted to point out is that this building can. Oh shoot. I love this. I love it. Can everybody see the key?
no, we can't see it.
I think we just lost him. Give it a moment here.
Skylar, well, we're waiting for him. It's hard to hear you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
All right. Yes, we can hear you, Jason.
Okay. Well, I think that was somebody else talking, but
Oh, sorry.
Mr. LaBarbera was speaking, and I that's when I cut out. So I didn't hear his question. I'm sorry.
I was questioning at 45 feet and you said you can do it at 35 feet. That was my question and you answered it.
Yes, we could.
All right. Mr. Wisniewski, did you have anything else to add?
No, not at this time.
Any other questions for him from anyone gathered here before we move on to comments?
Yeah, I do have one, Jason. Sorry. I must have missed this weeks ago. Is there no retaining wall anymore?
There would be, right now we have a retaining wall planned along the southern end of the property, but not along the eastern end of the property.
Okay. I didn't see that in the drawing, but I was more looking at the eastern portion. Thank you.
Right. And again, that's a development plan. We could get to that level of detail, but right now, no, we do not have one planned for the eastern side.
Any other questions for the developer from anyone?
I had a question. I guess really Skylar could maybe answer it. Is the 35 feet calculated to the top of the peak, or is it like the garage, detached garages, that it's up halfway up the peak?
And it's mean of the peak. Can you guys hear me?
Mean level peak. So really 40 feet to 35 feet would be perhaps halfway up that peak. Is that not correct?
Yeah. Take the total height of that peak, cut it in half. That's your mean.
And then that would make them be as of right if they complied with that at 35 at mid peak. Is that true?
Quite possibly. Yeah. I mean, I don't
Just-
want to see an
just
actual
wondering.
construction drawing, but it's close.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'm sorry, Mr. Janis has a question. Were you raising your hand?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize because many of you were freezing and I had to boot in and out. So this might have already been asked. On this new revised plan, apparently there is only one main driveway to get in and out to the main road. Am I correct?
But we're not
That is
reviewing the PUD.
correct.
Jay.
I'm sorry?
We're not reviewing the PUD tonight. We're looking at the zone change in and of itself.
Did you have a question about that, Mr. Janis?
He faded out on me. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear what he was saying.
Mr. Miller said we're not reviewing the proposed PUD at this point. We're reviewing the proposed zone change from B to D.
Okay, then I'll hold on my additional questions. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, sir. I did have a question for the developer here, if you could address this, and it goes to a comment just made here. We are reviewing not the PUD or the precise plan necessarily, but a proposed change from residential to multifamily D. And these are beautiful plans that have been shown to everyone here in the meeting, nice renderings. We understand the developer has tried to work with the community to change the scale and layout as to some of this. But the question remains before the board, should we deviate from what appears to be in our land use plan and make that change? Is there anything the applicant would like to speak to as to why that change should be made as opposed to this is a nice project? And is there anything you wanted to add as to that?
There's something I will add. Tom, is Tom Tepe on the line as well?
He was, and appears to be somewhere. There we go. Sorry, a lot of people on screen.
Sure. I didn't know if Tom wanted to answer that question or if I want, or if he wants to answer it. Otherwise, I'll answer it. Not hearing anything. So
You're not. Yeah, you're muted somehow. We can't hear you. Zoom does not show that it's muted, but maybe your microphone on your computer is. Have you got a whiteboard? Still can't hear you. No. Well, we can come back to you to address that later if you're able to resolve the microphone question, or Jason.
Well, I guess what I would say, Mr. James, to answer that question, and Tom might add some color or some additional comments to it, but I guess what I would say at this point is, if you're talking about a transitional use, we're talking about transitional use from detached single-family homes on the east to, a Mercedes-Benz dealership on the other side, just on the west side of Montgomery Road, a strip center just to our south. Obviously, there's a medical office building a new medical office building to the north. Allowing it as a B residential, a detached single-family residential, is not transition, or at least not in our opinion, is not transition. And detached single family really is not a viable use on that location. Now, I know we had conversations in our earlier meetings about what about additional office or retail, and that's not something that Fisher Homes or Grand Communities does. So I guess what we would say is these townhomes, or the proposed plan, the 16 townhomes that we're presenting, that really, in our opinion, fits the transitional use. It leaves the green space per the land use plan along that eastern boundary. The changes that we've made in density have increased that space to meet that land use plan. So the argument we would make is what we're proposing really is a transitional use between that detached single family on the east and the more intense commercial uses along Montgomery Road. this is the transitional use, and we hope the trustees consider our proposal as a good transitional use.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tepe, we still can't hear you. Sorry. We'll move on. If you're able to join in with audio through phone or something, maybe we can get your comments in a moment. Let me ask first, we're going to move on to public comments as to this. First, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed rezoning from B to D on this site? Anyone there? Mr. Mallow has signaled he would like to speak. Mr. Mallow, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the board, Mr. James, for letting me speak. I just like to make one comment. I don't know if it's necessarily in favor or not, but I guess it would probably be taken that way. So that's why I said I'd speak now. And that is, I was on the land use committee in 2008, as well as the current land use committee. And we did recognize back in 2008 and currently, though the current work is not complete yet, that single family detached housing is not the future of this particular corridor and property. And the conversations were and have been that something of more moderate intensity is the future. What that specific use was envisioned was office, residential, of the like, simply recognizing that we can't quite predict what the highest and best use would be, other than the single family isn't going to survive along that corridor. And that's basically where we stopped, with some conversation most recently around recognizing that as Montgomery, the city of Montgomery, finishes their work with Ronald Reagan Highway, and down to the south, there's going to be increased pressures and more particular attention should be spent along this corridor. So I just want to make the comment that the proposed use is, from my recollection as being on the land use committee back in 2008 and now, a viable and acceptable use to that committee. Whether or not the wording from 2008 got updated or corrected, as similar to currently, I don't actually recollect the trustees taking formal action on the 2008 plan. I could be quite wrong on that, because we kind of petered out due to some other pressures as well, meeting as a land use committee back then. So I'll be quiet, and I thank you all for your time tonight.
Thanks, Mr. Mallon. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak from the public in favor of the proposal? Hearing no one, we'll move on then to, is there public comment opposed to the proposal? I understand that some residents have retained an attorney, Mr. Tom Bridenstine, who wishes to speak. So we'll start with you, if that's okay, sir.
It is okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Bridenstine with Bridenstine Legal Services. I am an attorney for neighboring property owners Ann and John Shoney, who reside at 8594 Concord Hill Circle there in Sycamore Township. Of course, they're here with us on the call. My relationship, of course, is with the Shoneys, but I know that they've been in constant communication with their neighbors, and I know that these folks are in lockstep with our position here tonight. By way of further personal introduction, the Shoneys didn't hire me strictly to be their attorney. I'm also a certified land use planner. I have a degree in urban and regional planning from Miami University. I earned my professional planning certification from the American Institute of Certified Planners back in 1992, when I was working as the zoning enforcement officer for the Boone County Planning Commission. More recently, I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of the Planning and Historic Preservation Commission here in Glendale, where I live. And I'm also on the board of trustees of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association. As you can imagine, I try to focus my practice as much as possible in this area of law. Mr. Chairman, I know that you received my opposition statement. That our opposition is outlined in some detail in that statement. I'm going to use that sort of as a guideline, as a framework. In fact, the framework for zone changes is found within that outline. Section 16-4 of your zoning resolution sets forth 8 factors for approval that you need to review when considering zoning map amendments. Remember, that's nothing to do with PUDs or development plans. This is just the zoning map amendment. The first factor is the recommendation of your professional staff and of the zoning commission. You need to consider those. Your professional staff is chosen to avoid making a recommendation of any sort. That may be your practice, but I think that the failure to make a positive recommendation in favor of this proposal is damning. More importantly, your zoning commission, as you've already heard, voted unanimously to recommend denial. I want to refer you to the recommendation document. I hope that's in your packet or in the record. And I want to quote from that. Your zoning commission stated that the requested zone change, quote, will seriously affect the general health, safety, and morals of the township and the adjoining property owners, and the proposed density is not consistent with the surrounding area. Second factor from that framework, straight out of your zoning resolution, Mr. Chairman, you need to consider the reports of other governmental agencies. There are a number of glaring deficiencies in that analysis from the applicant. First, if you read the staff report, they say, and the applicant contends that they have received an access permit for this development from ODOT back in September of last year. However, if I can refer to you to Exhibit A of my opposition statement, Mr. Chairman, you'll see that ODOT states very clearly that no permit has been issued. No review has been performed. So I'm not quite sure why the applicant has made this false statement on the issuance of a very important issue, the issuance of an access permit for ODOT. It may very well be that they're entitled to an access permit, but for them to say that an access permit has been issued is quite alarming to me, honestly. The staff report says that there were no issues that were noted by your fire department there at the township. At a minimum, one would hope that on this very important issue, the applicant would have provided something in writing, some certification from your fire department that the site was properly designed with very basic life safety elements in mind. I think if you look at the plan, either the original plan or the revised plan with 16 units, it's quite evident from a common sense review of that plan that it'll be very difficult for one of your large fire trucks to maneuver safely into and out of that property. Of course, that threatens not only the safety of this development, but of the entire community. There were no comments received from the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. I believe that's not your practice to refer these matters to the Regional Planning Commission, but in fact, your zoning resolution at 16-5.3 requires referrals and comments from the Planning Commission. No comments were received by the school district. This application was referred to your own township's Parks and Recreation Department. And I think that's significant because, even though they claim that this is going to be marketed towards empty nesters and to young professionals without kids, there might be a family or two who sneaks in. I think that's sort of disingenuous. And I say that because we all know that empty nesters don't want to climb stairs. They don't want to go from the basement garage up to the third floor of where the bedrooms are located. This property and this product will be used by families with children, and that's especially driven home by the fact that this is in the Indian Hill District. There are no recreational facilities on this property. The kids who live there, I suspect, will find their way down the steep slope over the retaining wall into the creek bed, which of course takes those kids above and beyond and further out into the neighborhood, onto my neighbor's property, onto my client's property, onto their neighbor's properties. Honestly, that's a trespass, and it opens up liability issues. In addition, staying on the theme of recreation, there are no sidewalks on Montgomery Road, and none are proposed for this project that I've seen. So the kids who will be living here will be forced to either cross Montgomery Road or walk along Montgomery Road in a very unsafe manner. This is a busy highway. You all know that better than I do. It is simply not an appropriate location for a development that will cater to families with children. Back to the framework from your zoning resolution, Mr. Chairman, you need to consider public comments about the proposed amendment. If you've seen the zoning commission hearing, read the transcript, you'll know that there are virtually no positive comments from the public. And in fact, I suspect there won't be many positive today. You heard from Mr. Mallow, and he was sort of on the fence of whether he's in favor of it. Everybody who speaks behind me, I'm quite certain will speak in opposition. And keep in mind, when I talk about the public, we're talking about citizens of Sycamore Township. This project will be developed by a developer who's from Kentucky. They're going to walk away from this project once the last unit is sold, or they might even flip the development to another developer. Scholar might want to expand upon this, but now that they're reducing or proposing reduction to 16 units, that kicks this project out of the PUD. That just means there's a straight zoning of D that they're requesting. No PUD controls, no give and take, no negotiations on architecture, landscaping, other designs that are typical of a PUD. This is straight D zoning, 3.5 stories tall, 45 feet high, setbacks that are not would be conforming with zoning, but wouldn't be flexible in a PUD. So you're going to hear from those neighbors, and you're going to hear their legitimate concerns about the degradation of their quality of life, loss of property values, the visual impacts, the noise and light impacts from a residential development of this at higher elevations, environmental concerns from runoff, loss of trees, erosion, and of course, safety and traffic are a concern of everybody living in the community. Speaking of which, the next factor is the relationship to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. You know, in a vacuum, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing wrong with multifamily homes, but on this site, it just doesn't fit. There's nothing about these units, whatever configuration we've seen prior at the Zoning Commission here tonight, that meets this factor. And in fact, this factor, none of these factors, honestly, have been addressed by the applicant. And in particular, this factor has not been addressed by the applicant. Once again, no sidewalks. Kids who live here will be walking to All Saints and to Moeller High School. No recreation. Again, creating a safety issue when these kids will be trespassing into the creek of my client and of their neighbors. The property values. You'll hear members of the public speaking of possible impacts on their property values. These are all legitimate concerns, traffic and safety concerns. There was no traffic study that was submitted with this application. You know, we were told at the Zoning Commission that 22 units is just a drop in the bucket for this project on this stretch of Montgomery Road. Well, that might be true, but that doesn't address the real life safety issues that are lived day in, day out by you as trustees, and certainly by my clients and their neighbors. And I want to mention once again that your own Zoning Commission concluded, and I'm going to quote again, this zone change will, quote, seriously affect the general health, safety, and morals of the township and the adjoining property owners. The fifth factor, Mr. Chairman, again, from your zoning resolution, talks about compatibility with the township's plan. You all know that the plan is the community's vision for itself, and conformity with the land use plan is of utmost importance in the law and just in planning as well. Conformity is required in order to avoid unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious land use decisions. Here, I submit the project comes nowhere close to compatibility with any part of the adopted land use plan. It doesn't meet the letter of the plan, doesn't meet the intent of the plan. You've already seen, Mr. Chairman, the 2008 future land use map designation calls for this property to be transitional use with office. Of course, as you've heard, that's not defined, but somebody on the committee, and I think your staff might even opine that this includes a blended, the ability to have blended land uses within that transitional use with office. But that interpretation is inconsistent and really is not reasonable. And I say that because you have a series of transitional and mixed use land use designations right there in your land use plan. As you've seen, you have transitional residential, which is defined to be attached or detached homes only, specifically excluding any office uses. You do then, as you continue down the spectrum, have two mixed use or blended designations. The first, as you've seen, is a mixed use transitional. And again, that is defined to include housing and office uses. Beyond that, and I don't think it was on your slide from Skylar earlier, you have a mixed use with retail, and that allows detached and attached housing, and office uses and retail. So by any reasonable interpretation, when you take all that into context, transitional use with office must include office only and must exclude residential. I mean, again, you already have two land use designations that allow the blending of residential and office uses, the mixed use transitional and the mixed use with retail. And this property was not designated with either one of those classifications. So in other words, what I'm saying is that if the township leaders had envisioned a mix of residential and office along this part of Montgomery Road, they would have labeled these properties on the map that we've already seen, mixed use transitional or mixed use with retail. Instead, they purposely labeled these properties as transitional use with office. So therefore, office is the only use that was envisioned in this plan. In this interpretation of the term transitional use with office is consistent, Mr. Chairman, with the actual land use patterns and trends that have been established along the eastern side of this portion of Montgomery Road. As I think Scholar pointed out, well, if you're driving north along Montgomery Road, coming off of Miami Road, you first come to the Montgomery Point Plaza. And that's where the old Willie's is located. That's retail and office mixes, mostly retail. Traveling north on Montgomery from there, of course, the next site is the subject property. North of that is property under construction for the dental office. Beyond that, further to the north, is additional office uses, a financial advisor, a law office, a learning center. Every one of those properties north of the Montgomery Point Retail Plaza is designated on your plan as transitional use with office. Every one of those office uses has been developed under the 2008 plan for transitional use with office. Of course, just north of that learning center is the first instance of any residential on this side of Montgomery Road. That's the Bayard Court condos, which I'll get to in just a minute. You got to keep in mind that the 2002 land use map that Scholar shared with you earlier designated this property mostly for open space with buffer. That's because of the steep slopes and the creek that goes through there. But there's also a smaller portion that has transitional residential on it. That, of course, was changed in 2008 when this property and the neighboring properties were all changed to transitional use with office. And that again indicates a policy move away from residential. It was already designated for residential before. So the policy now of the township is to allow office use only in that transitional zone. Furthermore, shifting just away just a bit from the land use maps in the plan, there's nothing in the text of the land use plan itself that supports this project. And I'll refer you, Mr. Chairman, to Exhibit C of my handout. I won't read those here to you today, but as you skim through those and you see the highlighted text, you'll see that the theme is the plan calls for the protection and preservation of residential areas of the southern part of the township and only allowing high density development in designated areas. Well, this area is designated for office, and the plan calls for the protection of the existing residential areas, including my clients, including their neighbors. At the bottom of Exhibit C2, you also see a quote from the portion of the plan dealing with the Montgomery Road corridor. It says that plan on page 4-2, the plan is to provide an official position that property owners can count on. And you'll hear from the neighbors today that they count upon the plan. They count upon zoning and making their lifelong investments in their properties to the east. So in short, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing in the township's plan that supports this application, and none have been brought forward by the applicant. Sixth factor, back to the framework, is the economic viability of the proposed district. The applicant has provided no evidence or testimony on the economic viability of this proposed project or of the unviability of the development under current B zoning or of the proposed or planned office uses for this area. Their attitude, as you've already heard this evening, is just trust me, it'll work. We wouldn't make this investment if we didn't think it would work. Well, you need to ask yourself in connection with this factor from the framework is, what if the property turns out to be not economically viable? Will these units be converted to rental apartments? That's certainly a permitted use in the D district. Would Airbnbs be permitted here? Will this whole project be flipped to another developer altogether? The seventh factor, Mr. Chairman, from your framework is the compatibility of the proposed use with the character of the area. And I think you can gather the trend here. I'll tell you now, this is wholly out of character and incompatible with the existing pattern and trends in the area. Again, along this part of Montgomery Road, this is a commercial and office corridor. There are some attached residential developments to the north of this area, but they are low-level, low-density uses that are not at all like what are proposed here tonight. In fact, if you would refer to Exhibit D from my handout, I've provided an analysis of the density of those units. Bayard Court, which is on the east side of this project, just north of the transitional use with office, small condominium complex that has 5 units. Their density is 4.31 dwelling units per acre. Across the street, Wellington Glen, those condominiums have a density of 5.16 dwelling units per acre. Next to Wellington is the Pinehurst Lane condominiums with a density of 4.6 dwelling units per acre. Now compare that with what's proposed here. At 22 units, the density is 9.68 dwelling units per acre. And even with 16 dwelling units, as we've heard talk about tonight, the density is 7.04 acres. I think Mr. Wisniewski talked about a density of somewhat less than 7.04 in the 6 range, but I believe his math is incorrect. Instead, the proposed density as it sits here tonight is 7.04 dwelling units per acre. And you can see those are grossly out of step with the few condominium complexes that exist in this general area. And that's not even to mention that those units, the 3 that I just mentioned, those condos, their units do not exceed 2 stories in height when you compare to 3 stories here. And in fact, these units can be as high as 3.5 stories. The heights of the commercial and office uses in the area aren't even over 2 stories tall. So this is, you'll hear, again, you've heard it before, this is 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack, in addition to being the wrong kind of a use. And of course, just to complete this, the character of the area immediately to the east is strictly low density detached single family residential. So this multifamily attached housing is entirely out of character with every surrounding property. The 8th and final factor, Mr. Chairman, from that framework is consideration of the existing and proposed site features on the property. Right now, this property in its natural state, very nearly in its natural state, with a single family house built naturally into the lay of the land. By contrast, I know we don't have a full development plan here, but you've got to realize that this development will raise the height of the property. There'll be significant grading, which requires retaining walls, at least one, probably more, based on the previous plan that we've all seen. All to the detriment of the natural lay of the land. In the application itself, the applicant said that 40% of the site is preserved as open space. And you saw a lot of pretty green pictures here today, but keep in mind, if 40% is preserved, that means 60% of the site is going to be denuded and there'll be a wholesale degradation of the natural lay of the land. And you've also seen from those pretty pictures that, and from the topography, that there's really no way that this property can be adequately screened because of the slopes. Instead, the applicant, I think, is very honest to show that they're relying upon existing trees on the neighbors' properties to help screen this property. Let me switch gears here just a bit, Mr. Chairman. I'm almost done. I need you to be aware that I consider this to be spot zoning. That's addressed in my outline as well. But the Supreme Court, as you probably are aware, says that spot zoning is the singling out of a lot or a small area for discriminatory or different treatment from that accorded surrounding land, which is similar in character. There's an even better quote from what I call the Bible on Ohio zoning law, and I'm sure that Schuyler has a copy in his office, and that is, the rezoning of any single parcel is only justified when it is done in furtherance of a general plan properly adopted for and designed to serve the best interests of the community as a whole, and not for the benefit of a particular individual or group. Mr. Chairman, I submit to you that in addition to the fact that this doesn't conform with the factors for zone change from your zoning resolution, this would constitute spot zoning. It introduces a high density residential on a property that is surrounded by commercial and office uses to the north, south, and west, and by incompatible low density residential uses to these, all for the sole benefit of this developer with no regard to the neighbors or to the community as a whole. And of course, as you probably know also, spot zoning is not only lawful, it is unconstitutional. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, this is the wrong development in the wrong place. The master plan calls for office uses, and this is a proposal for a high density attached residential that does not conform to the area. It's way too dense for this area. The height of these buildings are way too high for the area. The scale and massing of these buildings are out of character for this area. And I submit that approval would be arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable abuse of the township's discretion. We therefore, Mr. Chairman, request that you support the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation of your zoning commission, and deny this zone change. Thank you, sir. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on with questions and comments as about it, I have a question about our meeting schedule. This is a logistics question. It is just after 7 p.m. We scheduled this hearing for 6 p.m. and we'll continue until we're done here. We would ordinarily have our trustee meeting beginning at 7 p.m. When we were all in the same room together, it wasn't a big deal for the public to figure out something else was happening. But right now we have different Zoom and live streams scheduled, I believe, for these meetings. Let me ask Mr. Rob Ebel if he's out there listening in. Is there a notice up for anyone who might be trying to join the other meeting that it will start shortly? Is there anything we can do about that? Okay. Okay, if someone goes to the Vimeo stream for the other meeting, what will they see right now? Okay, thank you. And sorry to interrupt the flow of all this with that, but I do want to make sure we don't have someone
If I
hanging
can
out there.
put a note on the township website saying that the start of the meeting has been delayed.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Well, let me ask first, do any of my fellow trustees have any questions for Mr. Bridenstine?
I don't.
Yeah, I do not.
All right, Mr. Miller, did you have any questions for him also from a zoning perspective?
One minor point. I realize how the other departments from the township are noted in the staff report. I believe originally it was common practice to say no comments. I did change that to no issues noted. I just to clarify, I did have a conversation with fire department staff and have discussed this with maintenance as well. So there has been internal discussion. There were no concerns of note to put on here. The turnaround for this goes back to the PUD, but the turnaround was considered. There was a safety consideration there. So those conversations do happen.
Very good. Did the applicant have any questions for Mr. Bridenstine regarding any of the issues he's raised?
I don't have any questions at this time.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Shoney, you're talking. Did you have something to add or? No. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right. In that case, I think we'll move on to the next comments. Who else from the public would like to speak? Mr. Zilch, I saw you raise your hand, so we can go with you. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me here. I appreciate everyone listening. What I'm hearing actually, as I listen to Mr. Bernstein talk, it just doesn't seem to me that the proper due diligence has been done. The arbitrarily, or not arbitrarily, but to make a decision to go to a zone change, to go to D, I think opens up really even more discussions potentially in the future if this development does not go. And so I think that needs to have consideration as well. The idea that a comment, I think Mr. Mallow said that single-family residential would not work here. We just had a house sell in our neighborhood for $600,000. It's being raised and a new house is being built. Just as the economics have changed that make it feasible to put a multifamily development there, I would say this market today would lend itself feasibility for detached housing in that location. I think when it was added back in, I guess, 2008 to go to medical office, obviously that's a general trend. That market is definitely viable in that corridor. It makes a lot of sense for that corridor. And so to basically just ignore that, I don't think you can. I think a lot of discussion was had. I'd like to go back, actually look back through some of the discussions that are on record as to the land use planning, because I think a lot of those things were discussed. And I think the fact that they did add the office in there was acknowledgement that that is a viable use and is in the same trend line as the rest of the medical offices that have been constructed there, whether it's medical office, whether it's insurance companies, whatever it may be. I think is very viable, very viable for that location. I think to go into the multifamily use, it's really, I think we've said it time and time again here that it's really a detriment to all the neighbors on the other side of the creek. You can talk all day long about not being an impact, but I can guarantee you the way noise travels through those woods, it is definitely noise pollution is going to be a big issue. If you go there now and look with all the foliage gone, whatever, direct visual into that development, regardless of what you talk about the tree buffers. Well, those tree buffers don't do a whole lot during the winter time. And so I think, again, it's a detriment to the people that are living there now. And I don't know why, I don't know what the plus side is for Sycamore Township. I really don't care about what's happening in Montgomery. I care about what's happening in Sycamore. And I would just like to hear why. Why make the zone change? Well, how is it a benefit to Sycamore Township? I just listen to all these discussions. I just do not see it. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
One question, if you would, you may have done this at the outset and I missed it, but would you please state your name and your residence for the record here also?
My name is Brian Zilch. I'm at 8598 Concord Hill Circle. I'm adjacent owner to the Dons, who are part of the 200-foot. Actually, my visual from my my first floor looks directly into this development. Wasn't part of the 200-foot group that had received formal notification, but I'm adjacent to them and I look again directly into this development.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would ask anyone else who speaks if you would please identify yourself for the record and state where you live also. Mr. Werdeman, I think you had contacted me through chat saying you had a comment you wanted to make, so we'll go to you next.
Yeah, hi, my name's Joe Werdeman. I live at 8801 Lindcrest, in adjacent property to the proposed development. And, I grew up in this house. After 35 years, my wife and I bought it from my father. And to me, that's the kind of community we have here. I want to live here. I want to send our kids to Indian Hill. I have the same experience growing up. Over my shoulder, to Mr. Zilch's point, you can see the current house there. That's the vegetation that they're planning on keeping and actually removing some. And I do appreciate that we went from 22 to 16 units, but I mean, during the winter for 6+ months, those close units, they'll be able to look in when we're eating dinner. I'm sitting at my kitchen table. The way that the house is developed over time, our bathroom window actually faces that way as well. It doesn't change the fact, but it's just as you get close to property, the way vegetation works in the world, it just makes it very
Joe,
difficult.
we're losing you and lost the last sentence or two.
Mr. Bridenstine touched on most of the things, so I won't. Sorry, is that better?
Little better. We lost the last few seconds of what you said also.
Okay. I'll just, Mr. Bridenstine covered most of it, so I won't, continue to repeat. But one thing that Jason did say is that The transitional is definitely meant for multifamily. And for me, I don't disagree with that point, but the key is that everything else surrounding this area is typically 9 to 5 or 8 to 8 type businesses, and really doesn't impede on the noise pollution. If I want to be out on my deck at night, or anything that happens with that, so that it is a difference in what the outcome is. It's not so much about heights and density and those things. It's about the real life living with it. It really, the dentist office, I said it at the zoning commission meeting, it literally, in like the only year where where all we could do was sit outside on the deck and enjoy our property, they were grinding, cutting, and everything because they're allowed to sun up to sundown. And, that's 9 o'clock in the middle of summer. So I couldn't sit out there and listen to Reds games or do anything else because of that. And it's just another note of what these types of large developments come with for those of us that live right next door. And it's something that, I know we're on the land use plan of 2008, so it's kind of a moot point. But if you look back at the 2002, they divided the property into two sections. Basically, they had a buffer and they had the usable land. And part of that, in my opinion, I'm not a developer or anything else, but in my opinion, is because the real developable land of that is what is sort of not in the steep grades and the other things that are going to have to be cut off by retaining walls. And so really, the math works out to density because of the size of the property. But it's really, if you go and you look at the actual property and what's able to be developed, you're kind of getting a technicality there, in my opinion. And the last thing that I'd say is, not that we don't want empty nesters and not that we don't want young professionals in the community. And honestly, 16 units isn't going to sway it, but I think we all know there's a vote in May for a levy. And those types of things aren't passed typically by, empty nesters and young professionals. It's just not something that they're interested in. They're not interested in, this would cost everybody $100 a month if these units were in there. And depending on how long that process gets delayed, they may get a chance to vote on it. So it's just too much. And it's constant with this property. And unfortunately, all the other properties have found viable uses and viable returns on investments of things that the community relatively has not fought along the line. So.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Werdeman from anyone? All right. Would anyone else like to speak? Mr. Don, yes.
Thank you. My name is Michael Don. I live at 8596 Concord Hill Circle, adjacent to the proposed property. I would just like to state that my wife and I are opposed to this rezoning for the reasons that have been stated. The properties on both sides of this proposed property are retail and commercial offices, and it's not consistent to put in family homes there or multifamily homes. And we do not feel that it would be beneficial to our property or to our way of life, to our enjoyment of our property for that to be there. And just wanted to give you our opinion and our thoughts on it, and thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone have questions for him? All right. Would anyone else like to speak?
I'd speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Matt Martin. I'll be very brief. I live at 8850 Lindcrest Drive, and I'm just speaking to go on record. I think Mr. Bridenstine did a really nice job thoroughly outlining the reasons this zoning change is incompatible with our community. And I just want to make sure that I'm on record as being in opposition of it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? All right. Public comment going once, going twice. Very good. All right. We shall move on here then. Did the applicant have any additional information that you'd like to provide?
Am I able to be?
I have to. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Am I able to be heard now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Speak up just a little, and I'm sorry my dog is speaking, so I'm going to mute my microphone.
Not a problem. I apologize for the technical delay. My name is Tom Tepe. I'm an attorney for the applicant. I just want to kind of like restate the narrative here. You heard a lot of the discussion from Mr. Breitenstein about all the reasons why this doesn't comply. I think he did a really good job with the scare tactic, using every superlative that probably is known to man, including the threat of children. My God, children in Sycamore Township. What a horrible thing that would be. You as trustees are very smart. You're elected to make decisions for the benefit of the entire township. And I would just like to pose this one scenario to you, which is everybody is pointing to the land use plan. The land use plan is simply a guide. It is not gospel. Mind you, it is 13 years old. Oh, what transitions have taken place in 13 years in Sycamore Township. There's been a tremendous amount. But one thing has been made abundantly clear, no matter how you want to read this land use plan, is that the existing zoning is completely indefensible. It's completely arbitrary, and it's completely out of place. So the questions that you have to ask yourself as trustees is, should it be rezoned, and do you like this project? There's a lot of detail that will have to come forward later, but just don't throw common sense out the door. The existing single-family residential zoning is arbitrary by your own land use code. If you want to live by the sword, you better die by the sword as well. So if you're pointing to, if the opposition is pointing to the land use plan as basis for why it should be denied, it's also serving very good support as to why the existing zoning must be changed. That's all I have to say, and I thank you for your time.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Tepe? I suppose I do have one. I'm sorry, did someone else have one?
Oh, no. It's Jason Wisniewski, but go ahead, Mr. James, you can ask your question, please.
Well, Tom, based on your comment there, you said there are two questions. Should it be rezoned, and do you like this project? Is there an argument legally that you're contending that if the trustees, in fact, think the current zoning isn't suitable, that it must then be changed to the D zoning the applicant is seeking?
Look, right now the trustees have the ability to control the narrative, right? If the existing zoning is found to be somehow not reasonably related to the all of the fancy legal words that we used to use, the health, safety, and morals, then control will slip through the fingers of the township. Here, you know what you're getting, right? Is it perfect for everybody? Well, obviously it's not. You have to make a decision for the entire township, what's in the best interest of the township and all of its citizens. So, look, the single family, Pete Mallow is a very, very wise man. He serves on the Regional Planning Commission, right? And I've dealt with Pete over the years, and he was part of the land use plan. He says this is something that was envisioned. This property abuts a high density retail development with a parking garage and a major auto dealership. Single family does not work here. We all have to agree on that. Now the question is, would you like to know exactly what you're getting, or do you throw cautions to the fates and see what happens? So, you have to make that decision, Mr. James. I'm only simply giving you some information and reasons why I think this rezoning should be granted.
Mr. James, if I might
yes.
comment on that. It may be true a court might find that the current zoning is not defensible, to use Mr. Tepe's terms, but that doesn't mean you have to approve this D zoning. The D zoning, whatever zoning replaces the B, has to still be appropriate. And I think that the more recent history, even more recent than the 2008 plan, the recent development of this area demonstrates that office type uses are reasonable for this area. The 3 or 4 properties that I mentioned just north of this site have developed in recent years as office under office zoning. So again, the court might strike down the D or the B zoning if it comes to that, but I seriously doubt that they would require the D zoning to replace it. They might instead opt, according to the plan, that office zoning would be more appropriate.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else have anything to add from the applicant or in rebuttal to the applicant that we haven't covered? Do any of my trustees have any questions? Fellow trustees have any questions?
Mr. James, if I might, it's Jason Wisniewski. There are a couple things. Look, and I think Mr. Bridenstine has done a very good job of laying out at least his case and his client's case in the information that he has submitted. He's done a very thorough job, and I kudos to him for that. I guess what I would say is some of the issues that he raised and some of the issues that have been brought up tonight, just as we are not voting on the development plan, some of those issues, sidewalks, landscaping, some of those issues are development plan issues, and they're not necessarily, that level of detail is not in the presentation that we worked through tonight. I think the question that we're looking at here, and some of the comments about, getting governmental agencies approved, and he has some emails in here about, whether our traffic permits are approved. I've read the documents. I'm not sure that we're asking the right questions in the right way to the right people, but neither here nor there. We have been reaching out to the agencies to keep health, safety, and welfare in our minds and in our designs throughout this process. The fire department, maybe the comment that they gave was not exactly what someone wanted to hear, but they have seen these plans. Schuyler, it was submitted through Schuyler. It went through the township's process. The agencies that were supposed to be notified or required to be notified have been notified. But all of that said, I guess what I would say is, what's the highest and best use of this property? And look, they're going to be ask a bunch of people, and they're all going to have a different opinion on it. But you could do single family detached homes on this site, and some of the things that we are proposing or we want to do, providing buffers up against the eastern and southern property lines, some of those things don't necessarily need to be done in that under the existing zoning, and wouldn't necessarily benefit the adjacent property owners, and wouldn't necessarily benefit the township, or they may not. Again, it's an opinion. We believe this is the highest and best use of this property. It generates, these are 16 beautiful homes that have low impact on schools. They have a low traffic impact. And again, we can argue that, but ODOT has already told us you don't need to do a traffic study. It doesn't generate enough traffic to warrant any kind of study. It's a low impact development, high upside in terms of tax dollars. There's not a lot of infrastructure there that goes into the need for taxpayers to fund. The streets are private. So we believe it's the highest and best use. We believe they're high quality units for good families or individuals that want to live in Sycamore Township. They transition well between what's on the east, the single family, and what's on the west, the commercial, and the higher use, more intense uses along Montgomery Road. And it generates a good amount of tax dollars. And Mr. Bridenstine's comment, look, Airbnb, rentals, those kinds of things. Fisher Homes does not rent homes. These are for sale units, for sale, attached, single family homes. And we do not rent them. That doesn't stop or doesn't mean that when we sell it to somebody, they have rights as an individual to their home, just as they would whether it's a row home or a townhome, or whether it's a single family home. They can still do that unless the township has regulations that would guide that, and then they would fall under those. So some of those things, I might back off what Mr. Tepe said a little bit, but some of those things are scare tactics, or they're rights that an individual have. That's how I'd say it is. They are rights an individual would have, whether it's single family detached or single family attached. And I don't want that to get lost in the conversation here. But again, I think the argument we would make is it's a great transitional use. It's the highest and best use. It generates good tax dollars for the township with a very low impact in terms of traffic, schools, and other infrastructure. So with that, I'm done unless somebody has a question.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Wisniewski?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Masali, would you please identify yourself for the record and then go ahead?
Yes, my name's John Masali. I live at 8829 Linkrist Drive. And I just have a question. Maybe Schuyler can answer it or whatever. But if this zoning change were to go through, is the developer not free to go ahead and put 16 units up as long as he meets the setbacks and and conditions in the D zoning? Or in other words, do we lose control by not having it be done as a PUD?
When we lose a level of control, anything below the 7.26 dwelling units per acre, that can be developed as of right. That still doesn't mean that they can put whatever they want in there, however they want. Our zoning resolution does provide for development criteria for multifamily. There will be setbacks. There are height requirements. But it is certainly less restrictive than a PUD.
Then my comment to the trustees are that I'm not in favor of this zone change. I would much rather fight through the PUD process so that more control and more limitations could be placed, assuming you want it to go forward. Thank you.
Skylar, can I jump in here? If we were to do that, 16 homes, they wanted 22 originally. How many could they then build? 18, 22, 20?
Probably 16. I don't know if you could get a 17th in there with the density. I'd have to do there'd have to be a final calculation on that.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else from anyone? Very good. We'll close the input from the public then, and applicant redirect to a close and prepare to close the hearing. I want to thank everyone, first of all, for their input here from both sides of this matter, and thank the applicant for working with the residents here in making some changes to the plan as originally submitted also. It's always good to see dialogue, whether it comes out the way someone wants on one side or the other here or not. It's good people are able to talk and try to come to some resolution when possible. I believe our usual practice is to hold the deliberations until our regular trustee meeting. So do my fellow trustees have any input on that? We'll move into.
I don't.
Appropriate.
I'm sorry, Mr. Weedman, I missed the beginning of that.
Appropriate.
That would be appropriate. Yes, I agree. So we're going to close this hearing out and move into our regular meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn this public hearing?
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Mr. LaBarbera, did you vote?
I voted aye. And can we take a 10-minute break as we join
Yes.
the next meeting?
Let me just note for the record, it is 7:27 p.m. and we will start our trustee meeting at 7:40 p.m. So thank you very much for your participation. The trustee hearing is at a different Vimeo link if you'll be watching. If anyone has signed up to speak, you should have signed up and gotten a Zoom link for that also. But we'll be bailing out of this meeting and moving into that one beginning at 7:40 p.m.
Sorry.